Welcome to the Ground and Pwn Podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined as always by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. I am back from New York, which means we have another timely episode for you. But I had a pretty interesting time out in New York. I met up with some old friends, some coworkers, and I crossed some items off my New York bucket list. But most importantly, Scott, you and I finally met in person.
I am most important. That is true. So I'm glad you acknowledge this.
Yeah, so we walked around Manhattan. We probably discussed a podcast's worth of gaming and MMA stuff. So we probably should have just been recording the whole conversation, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. With all the background noise and everything, you get to hear all the craziness in New York. That would be fun.
The sirens, the seeking out of restaurants that we thought were still open but are actually closed now.
We did a whole heck of a lot of that, man.
We really did. We found a lot of spots that we thought would be the spot for us, and then we got there and it was like, oh, this is now a laundromat.
And you know what it turned out? There was the restaurant we were looking for, Heartland Brewery. Remember that was one of the ones I was trying to suggest? That was also the exact same place as the one that no longer existed at where the Empire State Building was. So they were one and the same.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Mystery solved.
Mystery solved.
But yeah, so I am back from New York now. I had a hellacious second half of the week that involved all kinds of stuff. It involved a 3-hour flight that was supposed to be 3 hours. I ended up being on that plane for 7 hours straight.
That's good.
Later that evening, I went to the emergency room, so that was fun as well. And then the next day, I had to write, record, produce, and edit a podcast. So that was just like so much fun on about 3 or 4 hours sleep after a 7-hour plane stint. But
I must say, I didn't know about most of this, so that's crazy.
And then, I had one day to really recover, which was Friday. And then Saturday was an all-day affair at a wedding, which unfortunately meant that I had to miss most of the UFC fight card, which really bummed me out. But that is, I guess, being an adult.
That's literally the definition of being an adult, is not getting to do the things you want to do all the time. But I'm sure you had a good time at the wedding. I don't mean to put that down or put you in a spot where you have to do that. But yeah, adulting, right? That's what we say?
Yeah, it really can. It's, I did have a fun time at the wedding. There was a lot of dancing, a lot of great food. Really happy for the couple. It was my girlfriend's friends from college, so unfortunately, I didn't know a whole lot of people, but I made some friends, and it was a good time. But the whole time, I was also kind of keeping an eye on Twitter and checking for some like highlights and some commentary from some of the MMA journalists out there. And it seems like I missed a really weird card.
Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily the strangest of cards, but realistically, what the moment that made that card was the very last moment of the card, basically. Now, before we even get into it, did you even get to watch any of the fights, especially the last fight?
Zero. Because...
So you haven't. Okay.
Because by the time I got home, the co-main event was just wrapping up. They were reading the decision as I was getting home. And I said to myself, I'm not going to pay $80 to watch Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards. Because, I was actually on the verge before the card started. I was about to say, screw it, Leon Edwards was going to be my pick. I almost texted that to you, and I was just like, nah, I'm not going to. Because I actually was looking, and I was like...
Easy to say now, sir.
If I was going to... no, because I'll also tell you, I also was picking Aldo and Rockhold for an upset.
Okay.
So, I'm not saying I was some psychic person here or anything like that. I was just I was on the brink of texting you. I was going to pick Aldo, Rockhold, and Edwards. And I would have come through with the Edwards pick, but the Aldo, which, I've heard that the Aldo fight was very close. And the Rockhold fight, I heard
was a close fight. I think probably most people would agree that Merab won now.
Mm-hmm. And but the Rockhold and Bohoshinia fight just sounds like it was a clown show in a lot of ways.
It was absolutely ludicrous, that fight. Apparently he's just the eraser. That's what they call him now in the ring. So he's not Bohoshinia anymore.
Wait, but they still say Paulo Costa, right?
Oh yeah.
But why get rid of Bohashinya? I love that.
I know. I guess he's trying to go, I don't know, be more mainstream and American and that kind of thing. Who knows?
No.
I don't like it either. I like Bohashinya, but
didn't he just used to go by Paulo Bohashinya? Like, didn't he not even go by Paulo Costa?
He was called that. I mean, they announced him as Paulo Costa in the UFC all the time.
I mean, like before his UFC career, I thought they just announced him as Paulo Bohashinya.
I couldn't tell you.
He has completely changed his name.
It's not what. At some point, he's going to be Paul Cost.
Paul Cost. Okay, yeah, we're really going mainstream, appealing to the English-speaking audience.
Who knows?
Tell me about this co-main event.
That's all like side stuff. I mean, that's all dressing. Like literally, the thing that you had to come away from this one. And granted, I understand you're thinking, that particular fight isn't worth $80 to you. And if it was up to me, and I was saying the same thing, and I was like, I'm not me covering the sport, but I'm a general person who doesn't need to do that, can opt out. Maybe I would have said, okay, yeah, I could skip this one. But having watched the whole thing, all the way through to the very end, I would say having been able to have experienced that whole thing again was worth $80. I do believe that. Because that was an all-time moment. It was absolutely an all-time moment. Like, the Baba O'Reilly montage that they'll show if you go to fights in arena. If you go to the UFC in arena, they show between the end of the prelims and the start of the main card, typically the pay-per-view card, right? They will show a montage set to the Who's Baba O'Reilly. And it is really just a fantastic, unique element of the in-person UFC experience. You only get watching it in person. Sometimes you hear it over the broadcast here and there, but you don't really experience watching all these moments that are cut together. It's a really great, fight clip montage, right? This kick from Leon Edwards that put down Kamaru Usman after 24 minutes of heading toward what we all thought was pretty damn inevitable by the very end. It's an all-time moment in this sport. It absolutely is, and to be able to go back and experience it, I actually got chills just like describing that. Being able to go back and experience that again, all fresh, I would say that is absolutely worth my money. That's what you're paying money for. Is you want to watch something special. I watched something special, so I was really glad that I was able to watch that. I'm basically just rubbing it on your face right now.
No, I mean if I was able to. Like, say I got home right at the start of Pedro Hunsucker, like the start of the main card, or was it Tybura Romanov? Was that the start of the main card, or was it the feature prelim?
Hunsucker got knocked out in 15, like a minute 15.
Minute 5.
At the start of the pay-per-view.
Okay, so that was the first fight of the pay-per-view.
Yes.
If I got home right there, or even if I got home at the start of Aldo Dvalishvili, I probably
realistically, it was those 3 fights that kind of made this pay-per-view card.
But I also like Tyson Pedro, and he's been gone for too long.
Sure,
I was glad to see him back, and I'm glad he pulled off a seemingly a pretty easy win for him, like all things considered. But if I got home,
I say that I kind of more mean in the sense of this was the meat and potatoes of the pay-per-view. This is what
correct.
we're selling you, right?
So if I got home at the start of Aldo Dvalishvili, it would have been a real hard decision. It's like, all right, do I drop $80 for 3 fights? Like when it's a full main card, it's a little bit easier of a decision. But like one fight, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm dropping $80. I'll just follow it on Twitter. But and that's what I did. And I was like, all right, it seems like everybody was like, oh my god, like Edwards won round 1, he had his back and all this other stuff. And then it seemed like Usman just kind of did Usman things to Leon for the next 3.5 rounds. And then the head kick heard around the world happened, and my Twitter timeline just erupted, and I feverishly started searching Twitter for videos that would inevitably be taken down by the UFC. And
yeah, I mean the thing with that is obviously you're getting that click, like the kick itself, it is beautiful. Technically speaking, it's actually a really beautiful technique. It's executed. I mean, he sets it up with the feint of the left hand that kind of gets him dipping, right? And obviously that was purposeful and a mistake on Usman's part. But it's not just about the kick. It's really more about what it meant, because you were watching this fight and you haven't even watched it since then, right?
No.
So when you watch this fight, it's the first round, obviously, is kind of interesting because we get Leon gets a takedown for first time, like a real takedown on Usman. ends up working all the way to the back. He's attacking the back. He's not quite getting very close to a choke. He's landing some punches at the bell and that kind of thing, and some elbows. It was a good finish to the round. Absolutely. He kind of stole the round with this whole element here, right? The next round was pretty competitive, but realistically, Usman is still landing the harder shots. But they're still kind of in this. A lot of it is striking. A lot of it is kind of moving around, that kind of thing. And then Usman, he moves into the Usman things, like sort of you alluded to, right? He's taking him down. He's not necessarily always keeping him down, but he's taking him down kind of at will almost. There was a point where he kind of reaches out for a single leg on Leon Edwards. And I think the commentary team, I don't want to take this as my original thought, the commentary team was kind of describing it as like, especially DC, was describing it as, he's kind of looking down like almost to faint, but it was there, so he just took it. It really was almost like, is Leon Edwards even checked in at this point? Kind of watching this like, man, where is he? And then at the start of the round, you have Dean Thomas, who like just flat out trashes Leon Edwards' mentality going into this. He's saying like he is broken.
He's given up. I've heard that.
Described it as a broken fighter, that he'd given up. He wasn't making eye contact with his coaches, that kind of thing. As recently or as close to the end as like 10 seconds before, Daniel Cormier is basically talking about he's just fighting to get to the end of the fight. Mm-hmm. So it's just wild. Like you're being set up. You're being told this like this whole time. Being told one thing, and all of a sudden, boom.
So
and Edwards changes everything with one kick, and it's not even that it's one of those kicks like, oh man, he puts him out, he's hurt. It was a kick, and then it was over. There was nothing. He was just done.
Yeah, that was the definition of a walk-off. That's an old school Mark Hunt walk-off in terms of like just like kick lands, or in Mark Hunt's, it was often a punch. But the strike lands, and he's just like, yep, that's it. Done. Walk away. Hands up.
And he did it to win a title against the top pound-for-pound fighter in the whole world. After 24 minutes of not winning. After he was literally going to win 1 minute. 1 minute away from absolutely no questions about it. And it wasn't just because the scorecards told us later. Everybody knew it. Everyone knew it. You didn't need open scoring for this one. You knew he was going to lose. So this was it was like experiential, man. Like the whole 25 minutes was experiential.
It was shades of Anderson and Chael 1, where it was like, all right, well, Chael is obviously winning this fight. Yeah. And then Anderson just throws up a submission with, what was it, like a minute and a half left in the final round?
It was somewhere in the neighborhood, yeah.
So, like, it's very similar to that, only...
Is very similar.
Only Anderson was the top pound-for-pound fighter then, so it was just like him salvaging his championship, whereas Leon was actually winning a championship for the first time against the pound-for-pound number one, which, I mean, I think that makes it a little bit more impactful, honestly. Just like...
I guess one question that kind of comes to mind when I think of this whole thing, and you bring up a really good, not an analog, but I guess another type of similar situation here with Anderson and Chael is, does it change or maybe even remind you of when you're watching a fight and you think it's going one way and you think it's almost over? Maybe you don't check out mentally. You don't say, maybe I'll just go to the bathroom, or, maybe I'll go get that snack, or maybe I'll clean up and start getting ready to go. Maybe you just kind of be like, let's give it another minute here. I mean, does it change your kind of mentality? And maybe it's tough for you to answer this because you didn't watch it live, but I'm curious what you think now.
It's always hard because like that's the thing about MMA. It's anything can happen at any point. Like I've heard stories of people who like they were like, all right, well, Ben Askren and Jorge Masvidal is about to start. I'm gonna go get a drink real quick, and they come back down. They're like, oh my god, I missed it.
Yeah, see, I've never been that kind of guy. Like I'm not the type that's gonna leave a room when the fight is still going, unless I don't care. Like I watch a fight, maybe you just don't even care about the result, right? Like this was a fight you actually cared about the result. You wouldn't necessarily do it here, but like, let's say it's two guys, they're putting on a fight that's not all that interesting for 12 minutes. I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is the time I can walk, especially if you're heavyweight. Sorry, not sorry. But I feel like it does change, even for people who watch the sport like all the time and who really love the sport. Like there's people who I know that like they walked away. They walked away and they care about this sport and they care about the fights. But like, my goodness, they all knew where this was going. And it would have gone there if it wasn't for this one particular moment where Leon Edwards said, hey, I'm going to try this technique now. I'm going to throw it out there and see if it works. whatever he read off the situation or whatever came to mind. That's why it happened. But if he doesn't do that, he loses the fight. That's literally it. It all came down to him actually choosing this particular thing at this particular moment. If he doesn't do it, he loses. So, what are the odds of that happening? I mean, it's very low percentage. You watch a fight like this and you say to yourself, "Well, I probably could walk away," but you're right. Anything can happen in MMA, man, and I think that's kind of the point I'm getting to is this is a reminder of that.
Yeah, and that's why unless like I have something in the oven and like the timer is going off or like I don't know, something urgent is pulling me away, I always try to wait until either between rounds or between fights before I go like step away from the TV because this sport is just so damn unpredictable that like like literally anything could happen and at any
including
time
rubbing
too.
your bloody nose all over an opponent's face.
Yeah, that's a weird move. Like I've only seen like highlights and everything, but like that co-main event like just seems like it was such a weird fight. Like, you know, and it seems like the elevation really killed almost everybody on this card aside from Kamaru Usman who
well, I think you could argue maybe even he was getting a little tired in that round, in the fifth round, because again you didn't watch it, but like so in round 4 after the previous 2 rounds of him having some real success with takedowns and kind of being able to put pressure on Edwards and prevent him from kind of settling in and being able to strike, right? In the 5th round, he doesn't really do so much of that. There's a lot of toe-to-toe standing in the middle of the cage, and not a whole lot of doing. It's really not a big round, but they are just in the middle. He's not pursuing these takedowns anymore, and it was a change of tactics. And was it because of fatigue? I wouldn't necessarily make that leap and say so, but it's possible. I won't rule it out, is where I'm kind of going here.
Gotcha. Okay. But like, you know, Usman does train at altitude in Denver.
Sure, absolutely. But hey, it's different when you're in a championship fight. There's different emotions and that kind of thing. You could train for it. And his body was, he was still fighting. Absolutely. They were both still fighting. They were both pretty well conditioned, but man, it's a different animal, and fighters will tell you that it's a different animal when you get in there. You can train for it, and then it changes when you're going full speed, right? When you're in a fight, you're going full speed. You're trying to get the other guy out of there. In training, you're not trying to do that. It changes a lot of things. Mentality, it changes your adrenaline, all this stuff. So, yeah. But Usman in particular, I'm curious, like, what do you think that this loss means for Usman's legacy? Because, I mean, before this, not that you want to write off Leon Edwards, and I don't think people wrote him off per se, but when you have a dominant champion like this, there is a tendency to start thinking further ahead, right? Because we have somebody who's continued to win. He's looked maybe not unstoppable, but he certainly looked like the dominant champion that he is or was, and he is a champion for life in some sense, right? And he may still get that belt back next time they fight. You assume that's the next immediate rematch here. But what does the loss do for Kamaru Usman's legacy, sir? What do you think?
It's a tricky thing because, like, everybody was starting to compare him to GSP, and I think rightfully so. I think like he was a few title defenses away from being like, all right, this guy is legitimately the greatest welterweight champion we've ever had.
Well, there was somebody who was saying that as recently as a few days ago, and he writes a lot of the checks for the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, but unfortunately,
maybe too far ahead of himself.
This is a setback for Kamaru to reach that, but it's not impossible for him. Like, all he has to do is come back and beat Leon Edwards in decisive fashion, like GSP did with Matt Serra, right? Like, it's not the same magnitude of an upset as Matt Serra. But, everybody can slip up every once in a while. And GSP did with Matt Serra. He lost to Matt Hughes, but he got both of those wins back. Kamaru just needs to get this win back. And then he's back on track. It's a speed bump, I think. If he can come back, like, as long as this isn't like a Tyron Woodley situation where he drops off a cliff. This is like, if he comes back and redeems himself and just gets right back on track, and like, say like they do the immediate rematch, Kamaru comes back and like finishes him in the 2nd or 3rd round. Then it's like, all right, well, now like Khamzat Chimaev is next, and say he beats Khamzat, and then he sticks around and keeps defending the belt a couple more times. I think that puts him right back in the conversation. I think as long as he can right the ship, he is right back in the GSP conversation. Now, of course, that's a big if. That's a big if, because Leon Edwards, we just saw what he did to Kamaru. Khamzat Chimaev, if he goes out there and does what I think a lot of us think he's going to do to Nate Diaz and gets the title shot next, and then he's a really intimidating presence for Kamaru, even though Kamaru has shown himself to be just a resilient champion, this last fight notwithstanding, but like he's shown himself to take on all kinds of challengers, and Khamzat presents a very difficult and unique type of fight. But if Kamaru comes back and reclaims the title from Leon and defends it against Khamzat, then that I think that puts him right back in that conversation, because he avenged his loss, and then he also took on like the new hotness in the division, and then we're having a different conversation. But for now, this is a big blow to Kamaru, as long as his legacy, as long as this goes unavenged.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I've been of the belief that if I'm going to rank my top 3 in terms of welterweight greatness, and when I think of greatness, I'm thinking of your body of work less than maybe your skill set or your execution of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of your body of work. So for me, it's number 1 GSP, number 2 Matt Hughes. A lot of people forget about Matt Hughes. I feel like he gets written off a lot just because it's been a very long time, and there's a lot of what you've done for me lately, especially in this sport, which doesn't really care about its history very much, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does a terrible job of it.
Well, the UFC purposefully doesn't want you to care about it anymore. They want you to be in the moment, right? So that they care about their legends, but they also don't. When it comes to Kamaru Usman, I think he's like definitively number 3. I don't think Tyron Woodley's legacy touches that close. I don't think Bobby Lawler or anybody like that gets very close to what Kamaru Usman has kind of been able to accomplish. But I do think Usman was getting very close to Hughes. I don't think he was very close to GSP. So yeah, like this is definitely a setback. I don't think he was in. I think he just has several more years of having to defend against contender after contender after contender, the way GSP did. That's what I would have wanted to see from him. Obviously has a speed bump here, but yeah, I mean, I think you're on point here. If he gets back on track, if he's able to successfully get back his belt, especially if it's the next time out, it changes everything. He kind of can go back, because realistically, unless there's some shenanigans in the third fight, if they, we're presuming it's going to happen. If there's shenanigans in the third fight, yeah, maybe they'll have a fourth, but probably the third will be the end of it. And if he beats Leon Edwards, that's winning the trilogy. He probably won't have to worry about Leon Edwards ever again. He can move forward, and then he can start knocking off some more contenders potentially. But yeah, right now it's absolutely it's a stumbling block, but I don't think it detracts from his legacy. I think it's just, this is adversity. How does he respond?
So I disagree that Matt Hughes is number 2. I think Kamaru's run has been incredible, but I don't think you're wrong. I just think that my personal preference, I put Kamaru number 2, sure. Hughes number 3.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. I mean, when you consider the competition, the level of competition that they're facing, it was a different era when Matt Hughes was competing. But I think a lot of people forget just how many top guys that Matt Hughes was fighting and knocking off. It really was impressive in its time. We also have, because I would say that, would you say Woodley's number 4 then? Because Woodley had a really good run. Obviously, again, he dropped off a cliff at the end there, but he had an incredible run in his own right. And then if he's number 4, God, where does Leon Edwards rank? Because I know he just won the belt, but that's his best win by far. But he has been on one hell of a run. He had almost the route to the title. I don't want to compare these guys in any other way, but it was almost like Habib in terms of he just needs to win after win after win after win to finally get a title shot. I don't put Leon Edwards very close right now. He just hasn't. He's got some wins, but he's got a lot of work. I would probably put many other welterweights ahead of him. This is a big one. This is a big feather in his cap, but there's still a bunch. Pat Miletich, is another pioneer going way back. You could certainly put him in the mix. It's it's not very. I want I want Leon Edwards to get a little bit more done at this level. Now he's the champion. Let's see him actually defend his belt a few times, right?
No,
that would be nice. For me, I think, yeah, I mean, it's debatable whether it's Woodley or whether it's Robbie Lawler. I think I would probably put Woodley just ahead of Robbie Lawler.
yeah.
In terms of, welterweight greatness. I mean, Johnny Hendricks is even in there too. I mean, Johnny Hendricks had a really excellent run too, and he got all the way to the championship. And there's people out there who very definitively say he beat George St. Pierre, even though he didn't get the win, that he was better that night and everything like that. It's it's an arguable point for sure. So yeah, I would like to see Leon Edwards get a lot more done before I'm putting him in that range. But yeah, those are probably my top five. I'll go, with let's see some room to wriggle around near the bottom. GSP, Hughes, Usman, Woodley, Lawler. That's my top five.
It's a solid top five. And I mean, I think that I probably have that same list, only I would swap Usman and Hughes. But
all right, that's fair.
I do want to give Leon Edwards his shine, though, because this is his moment. He's the second.
Oh, he got a lot of shine. Don't
worry. He's
the
second UFC champion coming from the UK, if I'm not mistaken. It was right after Bisping, right? Like nobody else from the UK.
So Bisping obviously is the first, but also, I mean, he's from the UK, but also he's Jamaican. He grew up in Jamaica for a little while. I think he moved as a child, maybe 9 years old or something like that. So he represents the Caribbean as well very strongly.
Okay. But people gave him a shot because several people did pick him, but it took him forever. Like he paid his dues and then some to get to this spot. It was tied up with the likes of Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington fighting for the title, and it took Usman beating both of them twice and Gilbert Burns to finally get Leon Edwards a title shot, and also all the circumstances because Leon Edwards was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley in the UK in April 2020 or March 2020, and then that got canceled because the pandemic started.
It was the very first fight that was canceled main event that was canceled as a result of the pandemic. Absolutely.
And you'd have to think, with the way that Tyron Woodley was looking in his subsequent bouts, that Leon Edwards might have run over him, and getting a win like that over the freshly defeated, freshly removed from his title Tyron Woodley, that would have gotten Leon Edwards enough shine to get him maybe the next title shot. But, the world intervened, and that kind of set him on a separate thing.
Here's the funny thing, though, man, because you bring up an interesting thought exercise, right? Which I've gone through the same thought exercise, too. It's like, man, what if we had a world where, first off, there's a billion things that would be just great if there wasn't COVID-19 having entered the world and ruined everything, right? A billion things, including people's lives first and foremost.
Yeah.
But not number two, but way down the list when we get down to it, right? If you do have that scenario, yes, Leon Edwards faces that version of Tyron Woodley. It's hard to imagine, knowing what we know, that Tyron Woodley would have actually won that fight. Probably Leon Edwards goes in there, looks impressive, and then probably finds himself at a title shot, if not that year, the next year, around the time Gilbert Burns got it, because it was kind of the same kind of the track that he got it, right? Does he, facing that version of Usman, have the same opportunities to do what he wants to do? Or is Usman maybe not as evolved in his striking yet, right? Is he more inclined to lean on the wrestling? Is he going to be fighting at altitude in Salt Lake City, Utah? There's a billion other things that butterfly effect out of this. And
absolutely.
I feel like there's almost like a confluence of every single thing coming together for this particular moment to have worked for Leon Edwards. Because, again, it wasn't a fight that he was winning. He had some success early, but he was losing that fight. It's one moment that changed everything. And does he get that one moment in every fight? I don't know. I'm inclined to say no. So I think probably for him to get it, everything needed to happen the way it did. Like there's always, everyone says like, oh, it was meant to be, right? That's like the whole cliche thing. I think literally in this case, everything happened because of everything that happened before it. Like this is how it was able to happen. So it's a funny thing. I mean, I don't know, maybe you think I'm crazy here? Does this sound like it makes sense?
Though, when did Usman start training with Trevor Whitman? That was around the Gilbert Burns fight, right?
Well, he very specifically moved more of his camp out from Sanford MMA, which is now Killcliff. He moved it away from there because of the Gilbert Burns situation, because of the whole gym scenario. So, yeah, if he moves out there, if he doesn't fake Gilbert Burns first, is he even training with Trevor Whitman? Are we seeing this different type of fighter come about where he's much more comfortable with the striking than he used to be? Maybe an Usman who doesn't train with Trevor Whitman doesn't stand in the middle of the cage with Leon Edwards. That's kind of what I'm saying here, you know?
Yeah. But also, I mean, it's from the sounds of it. Again, I didn't watch the entire fight. I watched like the parts where Leon had his back, and I watched the coaches or the corner's advice to Leon in between the 4th and 5th round, or just basically telling him to stop feeling sorry for himself. And then I watched the finish, like the last minute of the fight. Basically, I watched.
By the way, those guys were like absolutely the British version of Mickey Goldmill. It was pretty wild.
But it sounds as though Kamaru was still doing like the kind of wrestling heavy approach for a lot of the fight. Unless I'm mistaken. A lot of the fight,
absolutely, and that's why it worked because he was doing that, and then he goes away from it. So
yeah. So I mean, there are a million what ifs that could happen there, but hey, Leon Edwards.
You to watch when it becomes available to you in let's say a free capacity whenever the UFC
I think it's a month
ESPN puts it up to free, which is probably in about a month or so. I really highly recommend you experience the entire thing because then you'll understand. I think there's a narrative here. It's not just it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings, right? The Lord of the Rings isn't about the end; it's about the journey. And I'm not a big Lord of the Rings guy, but I understand it.
I will say the end of the Lord of the Rings is pretty good.
So is the end of this. I think it's a good analogy there, but you know that's a lot about this fight. We've got some more fighting we want to get to, not too much more because we really want to get over to the gaming side as well because there's some fun things to talk about there. Real quick, Luke Rockhold, we brought this up before. Luke Rockhold announced his retirement after this fight. He knew going into this the whole week. By the way, he felt unfiltered. He was going to say whatever he wanted to quote unquote journalists, the Nelk boys, and all these people, and kind of go off about fighter pay and all this kind of thing. He was totally free, and so now that you know he retired, you're like, okay, that's why, because he didn't care at all what came of it, and the UFC knew, okay, yeah, we're just gonna deal with it this one and we'll move on. But this fight, he goes in, he has this weird, wild fight with Paulo Costa. I wouldn't say it was a great fight; it was a fun fight. And it had some interesting moments, but none more interesting than at the very end, Luke Rockhold, who is losing this fight, manages to get on top of Costa as in the closing seconds, and he's not going to win. He knows he's not really close to anything that's going to finish the fight, so he just takes his clearly broken for 10 minutes nose, which has been leaking like crazy, clearly inhibiting him, and just starts rubbing his blood all over the face of Paulo Costa. It's not an attempt to do anything other than be strange as hell. I couldn't believe, like, we're all just watching this with like this. It's like the Doc Rivers meme where he's just like staring off, like, what is this?
Yeah,
this is wild.
Did you see Paulo's quote after that?
I missed it. What is it?
So this was the I guess the post-fight press conference. Paulo said, "It's very disgusting. It's a very weird moment. The moment that Yoel Romero kissed him after beating him as well, that was the weirdest moment I've ever seen. But this beat that moment. I took a very long shower after the fight."
That is wild. I don't know how the kiss is strange just because it's like, what are you doing? But I don't think that ranks. I'm going to compare two moments for you here, and you're going to tell me which one is weirder. Right now, did you see? By the way, did you actually get to see the clip of him rubbing his bloody nose all over?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So you at least have the visual, right? I think you need that in this case. What is weirder? Luke Rockhold intentionally rubbing his bloody nose on Paulo Costa's face as the last thing he ever does as an active fighter, first off, just for added context, or is it when BJ Penn's licking the blood off of his gloves?
I think it's this. I think it's Luke Rockhold because BJ Penn licking the he's just trying to do the thing of like, look how like bloodthirsty I am. I'm like licking the blood that I caused off of my glove. You know, like he punched somebody so much it caused blood on his gloves and he's licking it off. Like that's just him being like, look how much of a maniac I am. Luke Rockhold doing this, that was just a weird thing, dude. Like, I don't know why.
It was weird for weird's sake, yeah.
Yeah, well, like, I get it. Like, that was BJ Penn probably caught up in the moment being like, look how much of a savage I am. Like, I'm licking blood off my gloves. But, like, this is just like, here, have some blood, asshole.
yeah, I felt kind of like that, right? And that's honestly that's very appropriate for Luke Rockhold. I would think weirdness isn't what I think of when I think of Luke Rockhold in the sense of stuff that he's trying to do, but maybe kind of being an FU to his other guy, which he literally said during the fight, FU, and then he drops him, or he knocks him back at least. He knocks Paulo Costa back. It was a very weird, I'm telling you, it's a very strange fight. It's worth your time when you get around to it.
It's super funny because Luke Rockhold spent the entire week railing on the UFC for fighter pay and the bonus structure and everything, and then he got a bonus for fight of the night.
Yeah, a $50,000 bonus, which, by the way, if we're going by inflation, over the many years since they had set that at $50,000, it's really not worth that much anymore.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, it's
just really crummy.
Remember when they, there were a few pay-per-view cards where they bumped it up to like $75,000? What happened with that?
So they used to do it a lot, right? They used to bump these up quite a bit. They would have, some of them would be 30, some would be 25, some would be 75. I think there was one time where they even had like 100,000, right? But what they decided to do, and I think their rationale was like people are probably trying to get on bigger cards because they know there's more bonus money up for grabs. So they said, okay, let's standardize it. That was at least part of it. I'm sure that there are many other factors which are a lot more, let's say, friendly to the payroll department.
Oh, yeah.
Of the people who are balancing the budgets at the UFC, especially knowing that eventually they were going to try and sell the UFC. They said, okay, let's just keep it at 50. But yeah, I mean, when I asked Dana about this, when I interviewed him last year, I asked him, like, had you guys considered raising the bonus money? Because it hasn't really been gone up in recent years. And he sort of dodged the question, but in doing so, he also ended up giving me this really revealing news about how they do their the other performance bonuses, the ones that they don't really hype up, like the locker room bonuses, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So they ended up giving me like actual figures that, I mean, according to them, were what they would pay out in like a given year, or what he said, like typically it would be somewhere between like $5,000 and $25,000 per fighter per fight. So he went in a different direction and actually revealed some really interesting stuff that I think a lot of people were hoping to learn for a very long time. He also avoided my actual question, which was, it was just a weird thing, because I'm like, I was happy to break this news and give people a lot of insight. But also, I wanted the answer. I'm like, why don't you just raise the bonus money a bit? Go to 60 even. Like, shoot, just raise it every like year by like $5,000 even, and it would at least gone up. But
well, hey, I mean, I think that I speak for everyone when I say that corporations should pay their employees more, especially when adjusted for inflation.
Yay! But anyway, before we wrap up entirely on the fights here, I think we should ask the general question, which we typically ask of our pay-per-views once we've watched them. Was it worth the $75? Now, you were obviously ill-equipped to answer this question anyway, because you didn't really watch it, right?
I mean, that final moment alone probably makes it a yes if you were able to watch the entire thing. But from what I understand, like, the co-main event was very good, if not a little weird, and then the rest of the fights were fine.
You pay for some weirdness in MMA. That kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm. But if you were able to watch it live, it sounds as though it was just purely for the end to Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards too.
I mean, more or less. That Pedro fight you mentioned, it was short and sweet. Pedro looked great, but it really was over quickly. There was the fight between Wu Yanan and Lucia Pudilova. Pudilova got the win. That was an entertaining fight. It was a reasonably solid fight. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you when you talk about fights and pay-per-views and cards and whether they're worth your time or not, I mean, you're talking about this fight, saying, is it worth just watching these three fights? Honestly, when I was thinking about how I would budget my money before, it was more about like actual, covering the sport and that kind of thing, where I would need to do it. I would think of it more as like, is there a fight or two that ultimately add up to worth my time? And then the others, I kind of just you throw them in there. I'm happy for them, right? But like, the totality can be, it could be one fight or it could be all the fights. That's how I kind of look at it. And if I only care about those 3 fights, really, it doesn't matter what you put on there beyond it. I'm happy enough with my 3. You've kind of hit the bar. Imagine like each fight weighs like a certain amount of dollars, right? And if I'm saying that Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman is $60, and the fights between Luke Rockhold and Merab Dvalishvili, or Luke Rockhold and Paulo Costa, and Merab Dvalishvili and Jose Aldo, if those 2 add up to $15, I've hit my $75 kind of range, if that makes any sense.
I like the itemization here.
Yeah. Itemization, there you go.
I mean, looking back at it now, like, I mean, if you took the finish, if say Edwards and Usman just goes the distance and it's a comfortable decision victory for Usman, I don't know if I would say, yeah, that was worth it.
Oh, it wouldn't have been.
But just because, again, it's one of those Baba O'Reilly moments that is going to live on forever, that made it probably worth it. But like, yeah,
that's why we're watching these things. We're watching it to have enjoyable, memorable times. I think ultimately, at least enjoyable times. When you get into the memorable times, that's where you almost like transcend, in terms of what your entertainment value was. So yeah, I think it's hard to put a dollar figure on something like that, because if you care about this sport, like you want to enjoy it, and I think there's few things that are more enjoyable than watching an absolute like classic moment and being in the moment for it. So yeah, for me, easily worth $75 on that moment alone. But like we said, maybe it's not if that doesn't happen, but we live in a world where that happened, right?
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about value here, and we're going to do a more extensive look ahead in the future, but like, they need at least one more blockbuster fight on this 279 card, because good God, I mean, they added Jingliang and Ferguson.
Li Jingliang and yeah,
that's
Ferguson.
A good step in the right direction, but
yeah. I don't want to go too deep into that.
I'm just saying, like,
the things we want to get to
where we stand now, I think we need at least one more big fight for me to be like, yep, I'm dropping money on this card.
And I don't know that you're going to get it. But yeah, let's move away from the fighting here, because we got a little bit of an abbreviated show. I had some technical difficulties, and we're starting to run a little tighter on time. So let us get over to gaming, because I'm excited to talk about especially what I've been playing, sir. But before I talk about me, I'm going to ask you, what have you been playing?
So I've been playing a few games here. As you know, I was traveling, as I talked at the top of the show, as we discussed in person. So I had my Switch with me, and I've been reviewing a game called Blossom Tales 2, which I talked about last week. It's still super fun. I am right at the final dungeon, I believe. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's an entire dark world like there is in A Link to the Past. But I'm having a really good time with it. And if you like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, or any kind of like old school Zelda game, like the top-down Zelda games, really recommend this one. It's both on PC and Switch. Then also Cult of the Lamb. Man, this is... I had to stop because the controls are so similar to Blossom Tales 2, but they're mapped completely different. So it's like, I had to stop and just focus on Blossom Tales. And once I finish that, I'm going to jump back to Cult of the Lamb. But good God, it's like part Animal Crossing, part Binding of Isaac, part Hades, where it's like, you're building a cult of these cute cartoon-style woodland creatures. And basically these cultists are like, they're your followers, but like they're not like the Animal Crossing villagers where it's like, oh, I wanted them to be my friends. They are a means to an end. Basically, like, you're like, oh, I need a buff for my upcoming dungeon run. This guy has a lot of faith in me. I'm gonna sacrifice him to the gods and give me extra health buffs and everything so I can go on this run. It is dark, it is funny, and it is
that's sadistic,
super satisfying, like, to go around in these dungeons. Like, the combat feels really good. Like, it's like almost like Hades combat with like Binding of Isaac dungeon generation, and it's a blast. And I think it's definitely going to be in my top games list of this year when the year is all said and done, unless we have just an absolutely stunning and like unprecedented holiday season. I think this game's going to be near the top of my game of the year list. And then Kirby's Dream Buffet is another one I've been playing, which is a game that Nintendo released just last week. They gave it like hardly any fanfare, but it's like
I didn't even know about it.
It's like a Kirby game in the style of Fall Guys. So It's a 4-player Fall Guys basically, where like you're racing through a course, And then you get to, like, as you're going, you collect strawberries, and whoever collects the most strawberries as you go through the course wins the match. But of course, they give you extra
you might
strawberries.
have been describing this to me either on the show or off the show at some point. Now that you mentioned,
Yeah, I think we talked about it briefly on the show, but I've only played a few matches. I just played it so I could talk about it on my other podcast. And yeah, it's a lot of fun too. I want to play more of that, but I'm just trying to get through this review game first, and then I'm going to be diving back into Cult of the Lamb and Kirby's Dream Buffet. Maybe I'll even go back to Horizon Forbidden West. It's just been like trying to get so many games. I also want to play Madden 23, which just came out this past week. But yeah, just trying to keep up with the games is impossible, especially when I'm traveling and away from my PC and most of my consoles. That's why the games I've been playing have all been on my Switch. But yeah,
I mean, that makes sense.
That's what I've been playing. How about you?
Well, I finally finished Deathloop, so that was a big one for me. I've been
no
looking forward to
spoilers.
playing this game for a long time. Yeah, no spoilers.
How did it pan out for you?
I had a really good time. I want to say I got, let's say, probably the most satisfying of endings, but it's complicated. Again, I can't get into it, but I guess there's a bittersweetness to it. But yeah, I mean, the experience was honestly, it was pretty cool. Like, but I would say this is definitely a game that's more about the journey than the end. I think in a lot of ways, because once you kind of get to the point where you're ready to complete the day, the goal behind the game is to, knock off essentially all the bosses. We'll just call them bosses for the sake of nomenclature for everybody else. The goal is to knock off all the bosses within one cycle of day in the game, right? And that involves you essentially have to set up all the ducks so that you can knock them down in the right order and the right times and that kind of thing. And that's what it's all about. Once you do it, it's kind of like, well, I've done this a bunch of times, so now it's just kind of like one final time, and then I get to see what's next. And then when you get to what's next, it's like basically over. So there was almost like an anticlimactic sense to it in a lot of ways for me.
Okay.
But I mean, that's not to say I didn't enjoy my time. I really did enjoy the time because the totality of it really made it great. And it's a game that I feel like I could dip back into, over time here and there. Like I'm probably going to step away from it now. But I could see myself kind of going back, especially if I have a buddy that I can play with and kind of step into the shoes of Juliana or vice versa and kind of mess around that way where you have the actual player element in there, the player versus player element gets put in there. So that would be an interesting way to go back to it. But, on the whole, I had a good time. I think it was definitely one of the better games, probably one of the best games that I've played. Let's say that's a PS5 generation, game as opposed to one that's also on both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a very, very engaging game. It makes you think about your approach to pretty much every situation that you come upon. And even ones that you think you've solved, it's like, all right, well, is there a way I can do it better, more efficient, ways that I can do it without sacrificing this part of my loadout or something like that. And you're always experimenting with different things that play into your play style and cater to how you want to approach every single situation. Like, all right, do I want to do stealth heavy? Do I want to it really feels like the true successor to the Dishonored franchise, which was all about that. It lets you approach situations how you want to approach them while also giving you very obvious targets, very obvious missions that you have to complete. And just it's just, all right, well, here's a playground, go have at it. And I think that Arcane, the developer, is just among the best at giving you the tools and saying, complete this objective however you want to do it.
Here's a question I have for you, because you've played the game too, and this won't go into spoiler territory. But what powers did you like to use most often? Which ones did you take in with you in the game more often?
Let me bring a list up because it's been about a year since I've played this.
There's only about 5, so I mean, you can add trinkets and that kind of thing. So there's only 5. There's the names aren't necessarily as important as what they do. So there's the one where you kind of teleport, right? There's that one. There's the one where you can go invisible. I think it's called Aether. There is the one where you can link enemies together. That one's called Nexus. So that, let's say you kill
one,
was
pretty
you kill
good.
The other 2. There is the one where it's kind of it's almost like you can lift them up like Jedi type powers and throw them and that kind of thing. That's one. And then the final one
it was the one that boosts his powers, right?
Boosts powers.
Like Havoc. I'm looking at a list right now.
Oh, Havoc, yeah, yeah, it kind of buffs you up. You become kind of like this like uber damaging uber tank for like a little while.
I mean, I
Yeah,
like Shift was a really good one where you can kind of
Shift. Thank you. That
teleport.
was the one I didn't name right.
Yeah, so that's the one where you can like kind of teleport, but it's like really good for getting out of situations. It's really good for like sneaking up on people. It feels really powerful, and it again it plays into the whole theme of like just allowing you to do the things you want to do with this game. So I
Yeah,
think that's probably my favorite.
that was the one I leaned on heavily. Like I never took that one out because I like to traverse like above and stay stealthy. So, if I would go places that had rooftops and everything, I would go that way. Even when there were some enemies, sometimes I would just kind of target those ones, take them out so that I could do as I pleased.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really fun game, and I think that experimenting with the powers is probably the most fun part of it, and then also figuring out the murder puzzle, as Arcane puts it. It's just really satisfying to put the pieces all together and to watch kind of like the spider web of like, all right, if I kill this person, I need to do this person next, and then this person next, and like figure out like the timing so you can take out all these people in a single day. It's just a very satisfying situation to finally put the pieces together.
Yeah, I think that's probably it's almost like the game ends at that point and you're just going through the motions of finishing it. It's almost like an epilogue once you get to the point where you're doing it in one day
Yeah.
because you've done all the work. It's more or less over, but you get to do it one last time and be like, all right, now I completed it. There is catharsis there, but again, it's a little different. But no, I had a great time. I hope other people will check that game out if they haven't already. And then I kind of, I had finished the game. I had a little bit of time between. I'm trying not to start anything too big just yet. And I think I played just a little bit of Super Mario 3D World. That was what I did just to fill the time a little bit. I haven't finished that. I'm like halfway through that.
Yeah, I mean, Super Mario 3D World, again, one of the best 3D Mario games, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of people. And I'm again, I've said this before, I'm extremely excited for you to get to Bowser's Fury, because I think that
absolutely.
is when you are going to, I guess, see what I think is the future of the Mario franchise, the 3D Mario franchise. So,
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
I'm very intrigued. But you already alluded to this too. I mean, there's a big thing that has happened especially in the sports game world. This is kind of the annual. This is the big game still annually. I think as much as you want to say FIFA is bigger internationally or for North American audiences, and we are in North America. Madden NFL 23. That is the big release. I know you obviously did some coverage of it in the lead up. And did you do a review? Are you doing a review for Game Informer or no?
I am not. No, we actually
Okay.
freelanced that out because I have too damn much on my plate.
Sure,
I've
sure.
reviewed, I think, the past
Understandable.
three entries, but
Right.
I'm not doing this one. I'm just too busy.
We don't need to go into obviously even if you've played the game. I have not played the game yet. We don't need to go deep into that kind of thought. But when I think of Madden's, I mean, I don't play Madden as much anymore. I just kind of moved away from it. A lot of my friends moved away from it, so it really wasn't a thing that we kind of do it anymore. But there was a time where I used to play a lot of Madden, especially in college. So I imagine you had a similar experience.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite memories playing the series over the years?
I mean, I think that the one that comes to mind immediately, and I think that I play Madden largely for the franchise mode. I will
Okay.
rarely go online, or the face of the franchise, which is like the single player focused career mode.
Sure.
So like that. Unfortunately, that means I don't have a whole lot of like, oh my god, that time I did this, because it's like, yeah, usually I'm just like managing a team the day in day out. I'm usually becoming a superstar in the NFL, running up the scores against my opponents so I can get more experience and then getting stat increases. But there was
You play
one
on the lightest difficulty to make that happen?
I do on the face of the
Okay.
franchise. I do, just because like I don't want to be like a middling quarterback. I want to tell the
Yeah,
story
no,
of
I
the
understand.
greatest athlete that ever existed. I want to run up the score. I want to win every career mode game. I want to win by like 6 touchdowns. I want to break every single record in the NFL. That's how I play like the career modes. Like I want to break like in MLB The Show. I want to just like blow past like Barry Bonds' single season home run record. Like,
Why, that's exactly how I would play it too. And I've
but
played
like
over
in
the years
franchise
those
mode
kind of modes.
proper. in franchise mode proper, I will do like the whatever the standard difficulty I play on normally.
I see. Okay.
But that's because I want to experience like the hardships of managing a team and like, all right, I have to be smart with my draft picks and everything. But like, I don't have to worry about any of that when I'm just like, all right, I'm the quarterback of this team, and now I'm going to lead them to like 7 straight Super Bowls.
So was Madden not like a big part of your like friend group interactions?
Not really. We actually played NCAA hoops or whatever the EA Sports one was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand.
We played a little bit of Madden. Like it was fun, but like Madness, it was mostly Halo 2. Yeah, NCAA March Madness. That's the one.
That's right. Okay, so you were playing most of those games. I will tell you that, especially in college, I was playing a lot of Madden with friends. So a lot of my distinct memories of the game come with, my friend group, really, especially a lot of the guys, again, from college. And freshman year in particular, when I was in college was 2004 into 2005. So we're talking about Madden 05. Which was the introduction of the truck stick, which of course changed a lot of things. But we were also coming off of Madden 04, which we also played to, I don't think we got, none of us got Madden 05 right away. So we were playing 04 for a little while. And that was the one with Invincible Michael Vick. So there's a lot of memories of people just busting the game with Michael Vick. Also, a good friend of mine, one of my very best friends, he didn't really know the rules of football. He was not a big football fan. He has become a football fan, and a lot of it was through Madden. But one of the very first times we were playing Madden with him, I think it was probably the first time, we were explaining to him that after you score a touchdown, you don't want to go for the extra point. If you punt, you get more points.
Oh no!
So we hikes the ball. Ball goes out, punter punts it, immediately no good. And so we just totally messed with his head. He didn't quite understand at first. I mean, it hit him. He's not a dumb guy, but it hit him very quickly that, okay, these guys mess with me. And then he repeated, or he resolved to punish us by becoming the best Madden player of our group. So there was that.
Well, I'm glad that he redeemed himself.
That's probably my favorite memory of all is just the fact that we had a lot of fun in general, but also we kind of had fun messing with him in the beginning, and then he just tortured us because he got so much better. Because he's a good game. Like of our friends, he's the best gamer. Like when he picks up a game, he will become the best at it before you will, more often than not. He's the fighting game guru. He is the shooter extraordinaire. He is very impressive. So yeah, we probably poked the wrong bear.
I do have one memory playing competitive Madden, and that was I rarely go online after like the review phase because I can't keep up with the people that like that's the only game they play is Madden, right? They play Madden year round, and like I get matched up against them, and they just blow me away.
Yeah, I can't do it either.
But like once I test it out for my review and everything, I usually just be like, all right, I'm going to play against friends every once in a while. Like I was in an online franchise a couple years back, which was really fun. I had like a really, really tough matchup, and like I almost made the playoffs because like of this really close final week, but I ended up not. And I remember one time in college, I was playing again. It was clearly like 3 or 4 guys in a room watching. And, like, they're just running over me. They scored, like, 3 touchdowns in a row to start off the game. And they're talking just a load of garbage. Like, they're talking so much smack to me. And I'm just, like, sitting there, like, quiet. Like, I don't even have my mic plugged in. I'm just, like, sitting there not responding or anything. Just, like, letting them talk their smack. And then I remember I returned. Like, they did a kickoff after they scored. Like, it was, like, 21-0 at that point. They kicked off. I'm returning the ball. And I run to the sideline. And they're going like they're going to tackle me. They're going to do a truck stick. And I did a perfectly timed spin move. And I spun around them. And I ran it back for a touchdown. They're like, all the guys like, oh! Like, and I hear them on the mic. And then I just disconnected from the game. Like, yep, mic drop, done.
Brutal.
That was, that's probably my most memorable Madden experience when playing with other people. But yeah, like, the online franchise was super fun. It's a games industry guy that invites me in. I wish I could play more, but like it's just I just don't have the time to devote. It was only 1 game per week, like unless like everybody finished the game, then we would skip ahead and maybe get 2
Sure.
games in per week. But like, yeah, that was like the expectation. It's like, dude, I cannot commit to that. Like, I can't like schedule with another human being to like get this happen. It's like I can jump on every once in a while, but yeah, like I wish that I could.
Adulting strikes again, right?
And I don't even have kids. Like, you have kids.
Yeah.
I don't have that factor. I just have life.
Yeah, that's the problem. My life schedule is it doesn't involve any daytime gaming, more or less. So if I'm playing well past when my typical 9 to 5-ish friend group is going to bed. So I'm like, hey, I'm ready to play. It's 1 a.m. Let's go. No one wants to do that. I can't even play with people on the West Coast.
Well, I remember every time I used to have a friend in college that every time a new Halo game came out, he would text me like, hey, let's co-op it. And I remember we got most of the way through Halo 5, and then he had a kid. And I don't think I've heard from him since. I mean, that's Halo 5. That's like
literally just disappeared.
That's like 2015 is when that game came out. And it's like Halo Infinite came out last year. I did not even get a text from him asking if I wanted to co-op that campaign, because I think that like parenthood just took his life over. And I'm like, yeah, well, that happens, I guess, when you're in your 30s.
What's wild is I feel like I actually play more games now than before. Maybe that's probably not entirely true, but I play a wider selection of games than I did before I became a parent. But I played a lot of games like not long after when you especially when you're a new parent. I feel like, at least for me, maybe this is just me, I'm trying to stay available to be able to help my kids. So I'm not playing online games anymore. Like that's pretty much dead. Like online gameplay is dead because you can't step away. But if I'm playing, let's say going back to 2015, I was playing Arkham Knight, or I was playing Metal Gear Solid, Phantom Pain, those I could pause. And that made it a lot easier for me to say, okay, my baby's crying. I'm going to step away. I'm going to go help. And, once he's back to sleep, maybe I just stay around just in case he needs me for a few minutes. So I'm just going to sneak in a little bit more gaming time.
For sure.
Yeah, that was the funny thing about how I was able to do it. Now, part of that is that you sacrifice a certain amount of sleep to be able to get that done, but also it allowed me to stay ready. So yeah, online gaming died. That is like almost impossible to do if you want to be a present parent. But if you're able to step away from a game or like pause a game, if you have that capacity, I think it's still a viable option as a parent. But everybody's different. Everyone has things different that they got to do and everything, right? So.
Yeah, it's really challenging, but I feel like for parents, especially parents of younger kids, like a Switch is a godsend. Being able to just like, all right, well, my kid needs me to just like sit next to him on the couch or whatever, and like I have a crying baby, like you can be with them and also have your Switch and like
sure, especially if you're going in a different room. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. But yeah, like I think Madden, I'm excited to play this year. I haven't heard really any buzz yet, so I'm looking forward to diving in myself. When I visited the studio earlier this year to get first hands on with it, I enjoyed what I played, but like again, like it's all going to come down to what the final product is, and I'm gonna have to.
It's hard to evaluate that.
It really is, especially right? Like it was an early build. It was like. Maybe an hour of hands-on time, so it's hard to evaluate like what I'm really. Yeah,
I mean, what do you really get out of that exactly? It's almost 1 to 2 games, Well,
we didn't even play like really. Yeah, like we jumped around a little bit, and like exactly. We played like some practice mode, so that way that like one of the producers was like, "Hey, here's like how the new like ball handling controls work." Like I'm gonna like
I've been in those demos.
Yeah, like here, run like try to like hold this button and do this, and like then do it without holding that button and see like what the difference is. And this is like what we added to this game. And it's like, oh yeah, that is noticeable. But like I need to see how
that
all
is
the pieces
exactly how
together.
They do those demos.
Yeah, I mean we did play a little bit. We played a few drives, but like that was about it in terms of like. It was mostly just like a demo of like here's like the new features and here's how it works. And it's like the QB Contain does work a lot better. But like, yeah, seeing it all come together over the course of several games is where the real proof is. And also the framework of the franchise mode and all those other modes are really like where the important pieces are going to come together.
Sure. I mean, you know what? That real quick, because I think we're going to wrap up here in just a minute. We're getting low on time, but I did want to make sure I brought this up because the other NFL gaming news from the month was that the NFL Blitz cab is out from Arcade 1-Up. which I don't know if that excites you or not, Brian, but the caveat here is that they removed all the late hits and all the other objectionable things that have kind of come up with NFL sensitivities in the last 20-ish years since these games came out. So, I mean, are we okay with this? Are you okay with the idea of them putting this game out, expecting, especially nostalgic gamers to go play this game that's not going to have a very key part of the NFL Blitz experience?
So first of all, it's this cabinet's called NFL Blitz Legends. It's gonna ship in time for this season, but like pre-orders are starting now, I think.
Oh, okay, so it's not out. It's just pre-order phase.
But so it's $600, and it includes NFL Blitz, NFL Blitz 99, and NFL Blitz 2000 Gold Edition. However, they worked with the NFL and the Football Greats Alliance to include hundreds of legends because, they can't just be like, all right, all the players that were in the game originally are in the game. But so they got Dan Marino, Jerry Rice, Deion Sanders, Brett Favre, Jerome Bettis, Terrell Davis, Chris Carter are the ones that they name. I'm a little concerned by lack of Randy Moss there, personally. But so they're remastered, and you can play all three of them on this cabinet. But as you mentioned, to support the NFL's current player health and safety initiatives, this has edits to certain moves or outright removal of others, which are going to be the late hits. And it's one of those situations. I think I talked about this when Sonic Origins came out, and they just couldn't get the rights to those 3 songs. And it's like, man, those songs are like total bangers too. And it's like, all right, well, if the alternative is just this doesn't exist, then I'm fine with it. But if there was anything they could have done to salvage those hits, then, but I don't think the NFL would allow it, right? They would just say no, it would feel insensitive for us to put this out when we're trying really to put an emphasis on player safety. And the NFL knows what it's doing. It's the same thing the UFC is doing with putting out the Performance Institute. They're you know what? We got ahead of it. We have all these people studying the effects on the brain. So years down the road, when all these former athletes are trying to litigate against these organizations, they can say, "Hey, look, we did all these initiatives. We did these rule changes. We had these studies. We provided them the free access to all this stuff at the Performance Institute." And the NFL, they changed a lot of rules to how you can hit certain quarterbacks in certain positions, and how you can defend a receiver, and you can't lead with the crown of your helmet anymore. So this is how they say look, we took all the measures we could, and some things are just inherently violent and detrimental to the body, and I think that is what this ultimately is. This is them just kind of saying obviously if a video game player is hitting another video game player after the whistle, it doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt any player. But this would be another thing that I think that
the optics
players would point to down the road, be oh, well, you advocated for these violent hits by licensing this game in 2022. So
not necessarily players, but lawyers
could. Yes, you're right. But the players' representation is basically what I was getting at there. But correct. It would be something that could be pointed to and saying well, you advocated for these violent hits and late hits and unnecessary roughness through the existence of this game. So I think that's probably the true answer there. But the late hits were good for the spirit of the game and kind of the hard hitting nature, but they weren't essential to the gameplay. It was just something funny you could do after the whistle. And I think that ultimately this is maybe 10% of a problem, right? It's not a huge problem.
I actually disagree. I think, granted it is a small part, that there is a bigger part of the gameplay in there. It's kind of that, what is it, 5-on-5 or 6? It's a 6-on-6, I think. Maybe it's 7-on-7. I can't remember the number, but it's less. Obviously, it's less people. So it's 2 blockers. Is it 8? I think maybe it's 8.
Or started with 5-on-5, and now you're up to 8-on-8.
I know, and I can't remember. The crazy thing is, I actually wrote an entire history of NFL Blitz for Den of Geek a few years ago, which I encourage people to go check out. Now that we're talking about this, but I think that there is a lot to the spirit of that game, where if you take out those late hits, it really kind of changes the spirit of the game, because they had put out an NFL Blitz in the classic style. From NFL, and they didn't have the late hits. They put that out PS3 like a decade ago. It was a while ago, and I actually still have it on my PS3. And look, it's a fun game, but also it's just that being gone is, I think it ruins a lot of the spirit and kind of the hijinks that you could have while playing that game, which made it so much fun. So, you kind of, I think you posed the question, whether it's worth it to even go back into the game if you have to, remove that or not. And honestly, $600 for that, and you're not giving me like what I think of when I think of that game, like that is not remotely worth it. I really don't think so.
Well, I mean, $600 is a lot of money for anything. Like you could,
sure, but I mean, shoot, especially if you're going to neuter it,
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that's probably going to the licensing.
I mean, I get it. It's not the price that I'm mad about. Like, you want to put a price on it. These Arcade One cabinets have been going up in price, right? I get that. It's more the fact that you want me to pay this much money for something that you actually removed content from. That's what, and names I get. I understand you're not going to have every football player. That I really do get. I would move on from that. Like the names are kind of interchangeable when you come down to it, especially when you're talking about, hey, I'm mad that I don't have the same players that were in the game 25 years ago. Like I can't get mad about that. Most people nowadays aren't even going to care, right? It's just old heads like us, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you took out a big part of what I think of as the experiential part of it, and it just changes the way I would like. Am I going back and am I playing that game now? Probably not. So
yeah,
no, I think it would be better off just having left it in the closet. That's how I feel.
Wow, so you'd rather not have this at all than have this game with the late hits removed?
I would. Now, granted, it doesn't affect my life if someone else believes that they can go buy it. I understand that. But, for me, like, it just kind of stings that, like, we're going to spread this game potentially to new players and they're going to miss out on that experience. For me, if I have the itch personally to go back and play NFL Blitz from the mid-90s or from the late 90s, I would rather just spend the money on a brand new N60, well, not brand new, but like an N64 and the cartridge and save a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, there
are, of course, other options out there for certain people who try certain things, so we'll leave it at that. But, I think that's probably a show for us, man. We a little shorter than normal, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And, make sure you subscribe, of course, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are listening to us. It helps us grow. Please help us grow. Follow our social handles, at Brian P. Shea and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram.
And, of course, if you want to reach us with questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear about, or just letting us know what you're hyped about, hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.